Welcome to Temporary Tables. Now you see it, now you don't. Hey, I'm Erik, and in this video we're going to talk about temporary tables. It's actually it's an ancient technology in the world of Business Central, in the world of Nav. We have had temporary tables for decades, but we also have received some improvements on temporary tables. So I thought I want to show you a couple of examples of how I use temporary tables. So I think we should get right into it, because otherwise this video might get way too long. So here is Visual Studio Code, and in Business Central there are kind of three ways where you can use and how you can use, or three ways that temporary tables. I'm gonna say temporary records and temporary tables, and it means the same. It's just out of my head. Sometimes my brain tells my mouth to say one or the other, and I have no control over that. So anyway, the classic way of creating a temporary table would be that we create a variable. So in this case, I select a customer, and the IntelliSense takes a while to figure out that it's not a table that's named customer temporary. It's actually a modifier you put at the end of a record. So now we have created a customer record temporary. So if I do temp cost and I say delete all, so now I'm deleting all my customers. So let's deploy this. And I guess if you see all the customers gone, I'm gonna be acting weird here, and no, we did not delete the customers we have in a customer table, because we just deleted everything that's in this temporary table. And let's actually figure out what is the temporary table. So temp cost count equal %1. So temp cost count. So we can pretty much use any record operation in the system on a temporary record. There's one area where a temporary record behaves differently from a normal record, and that is temporary records are not part of transactions. Temporary tables are not part of, rollback if error, commit, and all that stuff. They are outside of that. The data is stored in the service tier in a I guess since this is such an old piece of technology, it's probably a in-memory version of the native database that we had at some point, but that's just a guess. Or maybe it's implemented totally new now in .NET. I have no idea. So we know that there are no records in this table, which kind of makes sense because we just created it. So why would there be anything? So we can go and say init, and then we'll do temp cost number equal 10,000, temp cost insert. And if I do insert true here, then you know that the on insert trigger would be executed. And let's find the customer table here and find on insert. So we can see here that stuff happens. We can see that potentially we might get a number. If this number is blank, we might get invoice discount codes, we might get salespersons, update referenced ID, So this one starts looking at ID fields for the old integration things, and you know, there's a bunch of stuff happening. But if the stuff that's happening is actually doing database operations, so let's say that this one would probably we would survive, but let's keep it this way. So if we now do temp cost delete, so we're deleting this guy again. So we're just inserting in one and then we're deleting it. If we do temp cost delete true, so we're now gonna actually delete the temporary record but call the onDelete trigger. Then the stuff here takes action, and that means that we're deleting stuff in comments line, in customer bank accounts, in ship to address, and tons of stuff gets deleted. And just because that we call this from a temporary record does not mean that all this is temporary. So this code would result in that all the associated data on customer 10,000 that do exist will be deleted. And there's even bugs in the base app where the proper thing to do here is to figure out if you want to do this if the record is temporary. So what we can do, let me get out of that one. What we can do is we can do temp cost is temporary on any record. So inside trigger code, if the table that you're working on might be used temporary in some cases and not temporary, you can surround your trigger code with, am I gonna do this if it's temporary, or you know, if not temporary, then we do all the fancy stuff. But if it's temporary, then we're not touching other tables because they probably don't exist. Or we might need to use a different set of variables. But that's also problematic because let's actually I'll delete the delete statement and we'll insert some customers here. It's always good with customers. I don't need to run this. I think you guys know that it will. I can run it. Since you're asking, this will tell us that we have now 5 customers in our temporary table, which was kind of dangerous number because that's the same number we have in the physical one. Let's actually reduce it to 4 just so we see if I'm doing something stupid. So I see if I'm doing something stupid. But what I want to do is I want to create temp customer 2 and do the exact same thing here. So now we have temp cost 2, and I guess in that one we're going to insert just 2 records. Wow. Typing skills are challenged tonight. I'm sorry about that, guys. So now we have 2. And most of you would sit out there and say, Eric, it will say 4 in one and 2 in the other. Why are you even showing us this? That is because you come from a sane background. But temporary records were funky in, you see that? But that was actually a mistake because I forgot to put a 2 in here. So I had you for a second and I had myself for a second, but we don't say that to anyone. So let's do it again. Back in prehistoric Business Central times, if we did this, we would actually get an error because we were trying to insert the same primary key again. So even though we created two variables, it was kind of point to the same table, and the only solution was to create an array of records, and it was kind of weird. But as you can see, this is now the same. This is normal. This is working the way you would expect it to work. Okay, so I think I started this video by saying there were 3 ways we could kind of work with temporary tables, temporary records. So this is first. This is classic, and I use this a lot for, let's say that you run through all the customers, you find something, but it's not really a filter. So the one you find that you need to use later on, you stuff into a temporary table, and then you can process on that later. That also means that, of course, you can do stuff like temp cost equal rec. So now we create a copy, and then we could say temp cost insert. This will, of course, fail. We can try. I think the ye old debugger will yell at me in just a second. Actually not. So interesting, because I thought we had, so the question, okay, so the question is, what is rec on OpenPage? We could add a breakpoint. How about that? How about we add the old breakpoint? So we might just survive because I moved the 50,000. We got a breakpoint, so let's look at rec at this point. And maybe we should use the trick by typing it here. Rec is blank, so it's actually not even the 50,000. We got a complete blank record at this point because we're on OpenPage, so we haven't done anything. The page has not touched the database yet, so we get a blank insert. So that's why it kind of worked. But this pattern is very typical, that if you do something, then we save a record and in temporary table, so we can use it later on. So this is the first. The second way is if we have something that is, and let's just create a new table here. New table, and it has a funky field, length 13, and a nice field that is a text 100. How about that? That's a good. So what we can do is that we can tell that this table is temporary. And what does that mean? That means that this table will never be created in the database. There will never be a new table. It's just the name, that was kind of stupid of me. A new table created on SQL. This will only ever be temporary. So if I do something in here, what do you call it? New table. So I do record. It's kind of ugly. Record new table. This has the exact same functionality as this. So I could put a temporary behind it, and it wouldn't matter. That's not needed. It has the same functionality with or without. So by specifying that the table type is temporary, you are forcing all instances of this to be temporary, no matter what happens. Another thing I kind of forgot to mention is that, you see, because of this, if you remember what I talked about with the on delete thing, that even if there was some sort of way to say, okay, if the record table is temporary, then we do is temporary, and then we do something else. But that would be new instances of, let's say, I don't know, which one is a good one? Service header or not? Yeah. Well, I actually think it's using global variables for some of these, so it's kind of a bad example. But those variable will not be if you had in your code a temporary, let's say that you have a temporary sales header and a temporary sales line. So you're building temporary sales orders in memory. Normally a sales order, if you delete the sales order, you can delete the lines. But even though if we try to, in the onDelete trigger, try to make that temporary, it will be a different temporary than the temporary you have. So it will never work that way. So my rule is that when I'm working with temporary versions of real tables, then I never use trigger code unless I know very specifically that this trigger code is only working within the record, and even in those cases I tend to avoid it, because there might be an event, there might be something where suddenly you're out of your temporary scope and stuff happens. So I tend to stay away from any trigger code when I'm working with the temporary versions of real tables. So this was the first version or incarnation of temporary tables records. This is the second. The third one is, let's create a page. Let's keep using the wizard, not to waste you guys time. So temp customer, source table is customer. That is all good and well. Really doesn't matter what fields we're using here. Let me actually make sure we got number, so it does matter. Sorry. That's like the perfect table, isn't it? Oh, perfect page. So what we can do, so the third version is that we can tell that the rec in this case is temporary. So now this is just temporary. So if we, and I think I need to do something, caramba. Wow. Okay guys, I'm just typing random keys here, so I'm sorry about that. So let's change, so this is the one we're opening. Where did it go? So now rec is temporary. And I think I did not make it a list, sorry. Let's actually do, oh, I did. Oh, I made it a card, I know. I intended to make it a list. Let's listify this one, page type list, and change the group to a repeater. I think that's how you create it, change the card to be a list. Just change the type and then change the group to a repeater, then you got a list. That's a knowledge bomb here. Oh, come on, come on, come on. There we go, we got a list, and there's nothing here. So, because when this page is open, we get a new instance of a record, even though it's temporary, so rec is a new variable. We kind of have the same on reports and on XML ports, where you can mark a section to be with the is temporary moniker. But they have the same problem as this page, that now we need somehow to connect this with, let's see where we are with this. So let's actually very quickly say on action here. And then now you saw that I changed the card into a list. Let's change a on open page trigger into an action. Okay, actually let's try something else. This is late night in British Columbia, so let's try something else. So we could simply do page run, and this was the page, and then we'll pass the temporary record into it. It's kind of a, doing UI stuff on open page, like opening another page, it's really, really bad. So don't do what I just did, and apparently it didn't work either. So okay, I'll go back to my first plan. Actions, area, oh sorry, not area, at first, processing, action, test, caption, temporary, application area all, trigger on action, var, we'll just create another one here, temp cost, then we'll grab all this here, begin, there you go, and let's see where we're at, begin, that's not gonna work. So now we can do page.run 110 temp cost. Let's just get rid of all this down here so we're not confusing ourselves and especially me. Okay, so we have created an action that creates the temporary record, and then we're passing it to the page that has source table temporary. And we got nothing. So why is that? And if you're yelling at the screen, I can't hear you. Let's see why. If page run or page run modal makes a difference, might actually be the reason. Okay, I am so tired that, you know what, people, I'm sorry about that. Let me go back and actually run the page with the action. Okay, that's on me. Wow, that's on me. Let's see if we can get the last 5 minutes out of our lives back somehow. If this works, I'm gonna call it a. We got this one and we created an action over here. And we got data. So we got some interesting data. I'm sorry about that, guys. That was but look at net change and witness the challenge of real data and temporary data. So this is a sum field, and even though it's a sum field on a temporary record, it will still calculate the sum of the database. because again, going back to the thing with multiple instances, that even if we had in this case, we're looking at customer ledger entries, actually detailed customer ledger entries. So even if we had a temporary version of that, there's no way to plug it into the calc field, the sum index and all that stuff. So you have to be very careful about stuff you do like this, because suddenly we have data that is based off the database and not just a temporary version. Anyway, I think I need to go to sleep at this point. Clearly, opening a page, writing on one page and opening another. I'm sorry about that. So let's end this here. That's temporary tables, temporary records, and they are very, very powerful. I know that I actually have a tendency to I have started using the dictionaries and the list, and you can find videos on those on the channel. You might want to subscribe also. And if you just, I need to have the list of those 17 customers that I've found, but I don't actually need the records per se. And in cases like that, I start using list or dictionary instead. It's a slimmer data type, and there's less confusion because it's very dedicated. But in other cases, temporary is the way to go, and it's very powerful. It's very easy, but you need to be aware of those transition thing where you are looking at not true temporary data, but you're looking at something that's actual data, or you're triggering actions on actual data when you think you're just working with temporary. So be aware of that, and let me know in the comments below if you like videos like this. Subscribe and all that good stuff. And until next time, have a wonderful day, stay safe, and I will see you soon.